So regarding scoop import, right? When you are importing data from RDBMS system to Hive, if you won't mention any number of mappers, then how can you load incremental data?
Okay.
If you don't know the primary key at target system, how the system will consider and what may be the other method to load incremental data by using scoop? This is my question.
So the question you're saying that is the Hive doesn't have a primary key, but the that table has, right? The RDBMS table, it has a primary key.
Correct. Where you will
Okay.
mention in a scoop job, where you will mention that. Let us say you have ran the job morning, then you loaded some 100 records, and one more person came and they ran manually, and again 100 records loaded into Hadoop table, and it results to duplicates in a target system because there is no primary key at Hadoop side, right?
Yeah.
So how can you give your solution in this case?
See, one of the thing which happens in Scoop is that in incremental import, basically we have two ways to append or to last modify. So in append, what happens is that only newly added records in the RDBMS table are selected for import. And in if suppose if we follow the first way, that append way, so in that case again we will have a loss of data, because if the record is updated in the RDBMS side, but it won't get updated in the Hive HDFS side, because it will only select the, and that also the ID should be incremental, it should be in sequential way. So suppose after 5 we have imported and then we have inserted ID 3, so ID 3 wouldn't be considered. Simply it will look for ID 6 if we do the incremental import in append mode. Also, when we do the incremental import in last modified mode, so in last modified mode, what happens is that suppose a record is updated, so the timestamp attached with it is also updated, so it will refer to the latest timestamp, as well as the new record will also refer to the latest timestamp. So when we do the incremental import on this particular logic, then the updated record is also selected and the newly added record is also selected. So in both the cases there are flaws actually, because both will automatically create redundancy in our HDFS, that where the location where the data is being stored. So basically we use scoop merge command in this case. So scoop merge command, basically what it does is that it will so we will have the incremental imported data in one place, in one directory, and we will have the data which is already in the HDFS, we will keep it in one directory, and then we will use scoop merge command. And then in basically the gist about the scoop merge command is that it will actually check both the data from both the files, and it will, if there are new data, that means which the data is not present in the original file but it is present in the incremental file, it will simply add the data. But for the records which is present in both the files, so we will it will check the timestamp attached to it, and it will select the latest version of the record, and it will delete the older version of the record. So this is how actually this is how we used to combat redundancy of the data while doing incremental import.
Okay, Neha. What scheduler that you're being used in your project?
Oozie.
Oozie.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So, do you know any other tool, for scheduling?
I know about CS scheduler, but I am not that much acquainted with that.
No problem. Did you ever, used explode or lateral view in Hive?
Yeah, I did use it.
Can you please tell me when we have to use explode and when we have to use lateral view or both?
So basically, when if a certain column in a table has has a collection of data, like if a certain column, suppose basically what we had was that the customers data. So we had a column which was of type asset, but what happened was that a person can have 10 assets and a person can have none asset or two assets. So in that case, there is no fixed number of columns we can define. So in that case, we defined a single column which was of the type array, and so that particular column will have the array of assets. So basically lateral view explode is used to break that particular array, and it explodes that array. And suppose if a customer one has 5 assets, so when that array will explode, so we will have five rows of 5 rows of ID1, and each and every row will have elements from that particular array. So that's what a lateral view explode does. It explodes any data type, collection data type, which we have in a certain column. So yeah.
All right. And can you please tell me the syntax for map side join, and also let me know why we should use map side join?
Sure. So basically, map side join is basically used because it doesn't involve a reducer, because it only involves mappers. Because see, we know that shuffling is a very expensive process, because what happens is that in shuffling, or the data is completely shuffled together. So in mappers, what happens is that whatever, suppose if we are joining two tables, and out of which one table is smaller table. So in that case, we will actually load that table into a hash table file, and that particular hash table file will be distributed across all the data nodes where the mapper is running. And it is distributed in such a way that that particular file is readily made available. It is made available locally to those mappers. So in that case, what mappers has to do is that, since mapper is accessing the data blocks of the bigger tables, and it will have the complete smaller table readily available to it, so the joining can be done readily. So in this case, there is no reducer phase involved. So the joining is very fast. And the syntax would be, suppose select, and then we will do / asterisk plus map join. Inside the parenthesis, we will specify the smaller table, and then we'll specify asterisk, and then again / and then we'll specify the other columns which we want to select. And then from table 1, give it a alias, join table 2, again alias, and table on table 1 dot whatever column equals to table 2 dot column. So yeah.
That's very good answer. And do you think this map side join is costly operation or not?
No, it's not costly. Because since, see, if we will do join, anyhow it will involve shuffling. So shuffling is itself an expensive process. But when we are doing map side join, the only thing is that the data is being distributed across the various data nodes. That's what is something which is a costly affair in it. But then as compared to that, it's okay. It's fast. Yeah.
Do you aware of broadcast in Spark?
Yeah. So broadcast is, again, actually it is the Spark version of this map side join here. Basically what happens is that in broadcast join, broadcasting means actually, suppose when we create a variable in Spark, so that the copy of that variable is is transferred to each and every executors which are executing the data. So suppose we have an application, and again that particular variable is used after a certain time. So what driver program has to do is that again and again it has to pass that particular variable to the executors. And also, suppose if a variable has some certain data set into it, okay, and suppose we want to do a broadcast join. So basically why broadcast is used is because it can be done using normal variable also. We can pass, driver program can pass normal variable also to the various executors. But the only thing is that when we broadcast a variable, we have to do it, that's a one time job, we have to do it just once, we don't have to do it again. Moreover, when we are doing broadcast join also, so if a variable has the data frame or the small data frame or small data set into it, so we can broadcast that variable also, and then we can perform broadcast join, because the smaller table is available and the executor is operating the data partitions of the bigger table because the smaller table is available, and so the joining can be readily done. Also, there is one catch in it, that when we broadcast a normal variable having a data frame, so it is broadcasted and it is serialized in the it is serialized and broadcasted. So whenever the executor is performing the normal join, so again and again it has to be deserialized and again joined, and again it got serialized, again deserialized the data. So it is time taking. But here what we do is that in broadcasting, so the data which is transferred, so it is not serialized, it is as is, so the data can be readily joined, so it takes less time in that case too.
Fine. Can you please tell me what is the drawback of broadcast? You said what are the advantages, right, when doing broadcasting, a variable or data set, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is the disadvantage or drawback?
Yeah, the main broadcast, yeah, see, the thing is that we cannot broadcast a larger data because by default, the data which is of 10 MB, the 10 MB or less is considered as appropriate data amount to be broadcasted. So this is the one way. And one more thing is that because the data is broadcasted in memory, right? So we don't have that much memory in cache so that we can, broadcast the bigger data. So the data has to be small so that yeah. And even this is also a drawback in broadcasting, because see, the data is in unserialized way, and unserialized data is always bigger, because when we serialize the data, it is always compact, so it will take less memory in the the memory. Okay, so but when we do broadcast, so it is not serialized, so yes, it will take a lot of space. So in that case, the data has to be very small. Yeah.
Right, let me add one more point to the broadcast. Yes, we have some advantages and disadvantages based on our requirement. We have to choose when we have to go for broadcasting, when we have not, right?
Yeah.
So generally, let us assume there are four partitions in our data, in our input data. And
Mhm.
let us say four partition means four, you can say four, if we use Hive or Hadoop, then probability is 128 MB is one partition,
Mhm.
right? We can say. So like that, if you have a 512 MB, then generally it is Spark will create four partitions by default, right?
Mhm.
So to process and to do some aggregations, we need at least 512 MB of RAM by using Spark, right? But
Yeah.
if you use broadcast of any one or two of partitions, then
Mm.
let us say if you are broadcasting two partitions data, uh, then two partitions means 256 MB, right?
Right.
So 200 generally, if you won't broadcast, then Spark utilize only 256 MB to load the data from local hard disk to memory, right? When you do broadcasting, let us say when if we use four cores or four cores, nothing but a four executors, we can say these
Mm.
256 MB data will be circulated to each worker node, right?
Yeah, yeah, right,
256
right, right.
into 4. So it leads more than a GB, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
got it, right? So here is you are
Yeah, yeah.
using four times. You are using four times the more than the actual usage of data, or we can say memory, right? This is huge in case of larger application
Yeah,
processing,
yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah.
we have to be bit careful when we go for broadcasting. It is recommended strongly. We have to go for broadcasting only when it is needed, and we have to aware of the cluster resources before doing
Yeah,
such activities, right? So this
yeah,
you have to pinpoint when you are explaining about the broadcasting, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Very similar to this concept, can you please differentiate what is the major differentiate between persistence and cache?
Yeah, persistence and cache, the major difference is that cache, the data is stored in memory, and in persistence, we have several levels. Like we can store the data into memory only, disk only, memory and disk only, memory and disk only, sir. Sir means serialization, means the data would be serialized and then it would be stored in the memory. So but actually it is recommended, we should use memory and disk only. But again, when we what happens is that when the data spills over to the disk, again the input output is very much, it will be very costly affair. So in that case, it is basically good, that we serialize, we use search first of all to serialize the data and then process the data, and after we have persisting the data and we are done with the processing, we should unprocess the data. So that's very important.
So you are saying cache. When we say caching, that means data will be stored in memory only. But when we do
Yeah,
persistence, then we have several methods to persist the data, right?
yeah.
So So our aim is fulfilling with persistence, right? That we have a choice to store our data in memory by using persistence. Then why should we use cache?
Um, Actually, cache is basically used to cache is basically used to store smaller data, and okay, so your question is completely different. Okay. Um,
Anyway, we'll go back to your
very
basics.
fast.
If you know the answer, you can go ahead and tell me. If not, you just go back and see the Spark documentation. You will get the clarity between this cache and persistence. All right.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So you are using Scala with Spark, right?
Right. Right.
Okay. How will you execute a Spark code? Or generally you might written some code in Spark, right? What is the
Mhm.
procedure to run this code by using Uzi? What are the steps that you have followed? Or what are the editors that you have used to create a jar file? Something like that.
So basically, I used IntelliJ to write the code, and we used SBT. Build.sbt file. In there we mentioned the dependencies, and then first I checked the code, and when the code compiled, the code is executing. Then what we did was that we created a jar file. We use sbt package. So sbt package is used on the actually on the directory, on the source directory of the project. Okay, and then it will create a jar file. Okay, and then and we'll create a jar file, and after the we have created a jar file, we used to you import the jar file into the hdfs. Okay, using ambari we used to do that. And once the jar file is in there, so actually we used to embed that particular code in, and then we had to schedule the jobs which are there. So this particular jar file we used to schedule using Uzi. And because there were certain many jar files, because as one jar file was to load the data, and the second was to do the transformations on the data. So accordingly we used to schedule each and every program, each and every jar file.
How can you submit a Spark application? What is the command?
Okay, so the command to submit the Spark application is Spark submit hyphen hyphen. If suppose we have used any third-party jar, suppose we have used type safe config in our code, so we will specify that particular jar file in hyphen jars, and then we'll specify any third-party jar, and then we'll specify hyphen master hyphen then class, and then we'll specify. All the other like configuration properties, executor cores, num executors, executor memory. So all these properties we'll specify, and then we'll specify the jar file which needs to be executed.
All right, let me close from my end after asking final question. And I would like to know the difference between data set and data frame.
So data set and data frame, so the main difference is that, see, when in data frame, what happens is that whenever we load a data frame, so at the time of loading, the schema of the data is not known. After the data is loaded, then we know the schema. But in data set, what we used to do is that we every time, in data set, the main thing of data set is that whenever we load the data set, the schema is known at the compile time only, because whenever we load the data set, the loading is simple, but at end we use as, and we will give the case classes name. So case class, basically using case class, we will specify the schema of whatever data we are going to load. So we will specify dot as, and then we will specify the case class. So the data which is being loaded, so the schema of the data is known at the compile time only. So in this case, what happens is that whenever suppose we run whenever we want to retrieve a data, or we have used some wrong column name, okay, so it will give us error in the compile time in case of data set. Whereas in data frame, it won't give the error on compile time. Just when it will run and it will find out that yes, the column is not present, so then it will give the error. So data set, the schema is known at the compile time.
Then what you have used in your project, data frame or data set?
No, data frame.
Then You're saying very positive about data set over data frame. And why you are using data frame instead data set?
Actually, it was not up to me. That's what my teammates were using, and yeah, teammates. Actually, the course which was there, it was in the data frame, only using data frame. So I know it because I studied it, but they were using data frames.
So if you get any chance to give your thoughts to your team, will you able to tell about this?
Yeah, after maybe I have some more experience, so that I can tell them because they were seniors.
Right. That's it from my end. And yeah, thanks for your contacting us, and let
Thank
us know if you have any questions from your end, so that we'll try to answer it if there are any.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, yeah, I actually saw your sessions and it is very informative. Recently I discovered this particular channel and Clever Studies, and it was like very nice, very nice. I went through most of the interviews which you have posted, and yeah, at now I am too much overwhelmed, so I don't have any question. But can I please mail you if I do have any question?
No problem. No problem. And is there anything else that you want from us right now?
Sorry,
You need any other information from us
not
before we
as of
close this
now.
meeting?
Not as of oh yeah, yeah, I do need information, like how am I, means what do you think about me, means will you hire me like that?
Priya, are you there? Before tell my view, I think Priya is there. Then he may tell you something. If not, I will continue. Priya, you are there?
Yeah, so yeah, I am here. So the thing is, your explanation means what I think is, yeah, it's pretty good, and the confidence while answering is also very good. So overall, I liked all means overall experience, whatever you worked till now, and what the way you explained, it's pretty good. That's what I felt. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Priya. And Neha, yeah, of course, I do agree with Priya, and your communication skills are, above our expectations. And of course, confidence level is also pretty good. And these are the positives. And let me tell you things that you have to improve.
Yeah,
Not
yeah,
much.
please do tell me, I'll write it somewhere.
No need to. No need to. It is very less. Number one is you are so fast when you are explaining your answers. I don't know why you are already having good explanation skills and having good knowledge on particular answer. Why you are in that hurry? Okay.
Oh,
If
Hari.
you are able to slow down a little bit and explain the same story, that is very good. It will give more impression than current. Okay, you explained so many things. If we are asking some question, then we are expecting some crispy answers. But you are giving so much explanation. Of course, there is an answer in that, but we need to, identify that answer from your explanation. Okay,
I need to be
so
precise.
correct. That area you have to think over,
Yeah,
and that is one. The second one is some questions, some practical questions you missed it. Okay,
yeah.
being experienced person, you should aware your source. Simply, I can say you doesn't have practical experience if you don't know that answer. Will you agree? Because
Yeah,
people will think like that. If you weren't aware of your source, then how can I believe you have worked in a project?
yeah, right, 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 right.
You told so many correct answers. Like I will tell you one real-time example. Like you written very good, I mean, very good in examination, but you
Hmm.
forgot to write your hall ticket number. What will happen? Same story.
Yeah,
Interviewer are
yeah.
very smart and they have fair enough in practical experience, and they will catch you in one question. they may take only one question, can decide, right? So, and
Yeah.
obviously, the questions like version, questions like source, okay,
Yeah.
questions like some practical, I asked you, right? Versions I asked you, and then
Yeah.
some
Yeah. Yeah.
scenarios I asked you, and how will you create a job? How will you schedule a job by using Uzi?
Mm.
These are all very practical. Whoever are, good at theory may not be answer these type of questions, right? If you miss this question to answer, then interviewer easily identify that, okay, this person have good knowledge in theoretical but not have practical, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
this
understand.
area you have to take care.
Yeah.
Okay, more than 80% you have given right answers. Okay, and of course you missed very important questions. You should not
Yes.
do that coming forward.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay,
I will do that. I will do that because yeah,
okay.
these are scenario-based questions which I have to know that what I was doing because yeah, I have to know that.
Okay,
That's
an
how.
interviewer won't expect out of questions like what you doesn't have the knowledge. Okay, they will ask you from your resume itself and from your
Yeah.
project itself.
Yeah.
The moment we say don't know, then do we think interviewer know your project? No, right?
Yeah.
So this area
Yeah.
only you have to just go through it and be sure versions of each software that you have used. You should be
Yes.
know
Yeah, absolutely.
and source and targets. You should know about it. Scheduling part. You should know about it. Size of the files. You should know about it, right? And
Yeah.
removal of duplicates. This is a common question. Uh, if you won't answer this question right, definitely people will
Mm.
cut you because an experienced guy definitely come across this type of scenario in their project several times. Got it
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I do get it.
Go to your basics as well as your project and then prepare and all the best for your upcoming interviews.
Thank you so much. I'm really grateful to you. Thank you so much.